Tonight, the plot against Sunak is off for now. The Prime Minister appeals to his backbenchers to pull together after days of speculation about whether he can carry on leading his party into a general election. The big question now is what happens if he gets a drubbing in the May local elections. I've been speaking to Health Minister and Senior Conservative MP Andrea Leadsom about how long Sunak can carry on for. Also tonight, it's not going well for the government as a series of votes on its Rwanda bill takes place in the House of Lords. But the Home Office is still hopeful they can get flights off before May. And shock in Ireland as Leo Varadkar announces he's stepping down as PM and leader of Fine Gael. And as the Lib Dems launch their local election campaign with another eye-catching stunt, we'll ask if it's no laughing matter for the Tories in the so-called Blue Wall. All that and more with Rehman Chishti and Josh Simons, who'll be here with me for the next hour. It's Wednesday, I'm Beth Rigby, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Good evening. Back in the autumn of last year, when the Conservatives genuinely thought they could close the gap on Labour, we used to talk a lot about the Rishi reset. Finally, after so many false starts, there are now glimmers of hope for this Prime Minister. Inflation is falling faster than expected, which could lead to the cut in interest rates that he and the Chancellor desperately want to offer the electorate. And there's still a chance at least one flight to Rwanda could take off in the spring. Symbolic or not, he'd be able to claim the win. All stepping stones towards his election banner of "We've turned the corner." So perhaps the perennial hope of this election year, that something might turn up, is still alive. But just as he edges into a landing zone, the politics for him have never been worse. He's now dubbed the embattled PM. There are few people who think his position's recoverable. Tonight, Rishi Sunak's been speaking to his backbenchers over in Parliament, and reports from outside the meeting room say the mood is calm. But as we told you earlier this week, all eyes are now on the local elections in May as a moment of true jeopardy. So even if something does turn up, is it simply too little, too late? Well, Sky's deputy political editor, Sam Coates, is with me now. Sam, you were over with your ear pressed against the door as MPs met the Prime Minister. What was the vibe?
It was a lot less bad than you might have expected, Beth. Look, I'm going to make a bold prediction. I think that the plots that you were reading about, I think those plots are off for now. I think they're off this side of Easter. Last week was incredibly febrile. There was something in the air that was electric and nasty and uncomfortable for the Prime Minister. But I think as the party has come to terms with the fact there's no May 2nd election, which some of them wanted, as it's looked at the absolute absurd spectacle of its changing leader again in this Parliament, they've decided that now's not the moment. Now, what happened tonight was quite interesting. Basically, a whole load of sweeties were thrown at Tory MPs. So they were told, in the jargon, that from now on until recess, it's a one-line whip. In other words, go home, lads. It's time for they don't call it holiday. And some of them will say it's campaigning, and rightly so. But others of them will be quite pleased about that. And what that means is that they've put off the battle to kind of close the deal on Rwanda to the other side of Easter. In other words, that piece of emergency legislation that was so vital just a few months ago now is less important than giving Tory MPs a few more days of holiday.
Isn't it partly also, Sam, though, that we know that when Prime Ministers are having this febrile atmosphere, what you want to do is make everyone go home, because then the atmosphere dissipates, right? So it's partly get everyone out of the door. But it's true too, isn't it, that there will be some MPs looking at the idea that the Rwanda bill won't be passed or get royal assent until after Easter as a problem, and that, if those flights don't get off in May, could come back to bite him.
Are there mixed messages? Yes, hell yes. There are lots of mixed messages at the moment. I think that It is tricky that that Rwanda will is delayed, although now it sounds like it'll be a few weeks between royal assent and the moment that they hope flights take off. But really, as you were saying at the top of the programme, we're back in a world where people are just hoping that something comes up. But the other thing that happens over the next few weeks is people will spend a lot of time on the doorstep and they will see and they will inhale the mood of the country. Now, you say, and the conventional wisdom is that time out of Parliament tends to be better for Prime Ministers. I just wonder whether the mood reflects the polls, whether that ends up being true.
And just finally on this, for Rishi Sunak, do you think that the idea that he won't face a confidence vote has been put to bed, or is it just resting? That's also actually the same thing, isn't it? But
well, I mean, it's also a very unfair question asking me to nail my colours to the mast.
I love it. I love being in the chair. Make mischief. Go on.
And I don't know, because 51 MPs think that another leader could do a better job. But will 51 MPs send in that letter to Graham Brady with all of the chaos and all of the destabilising, all of the undermining that means? You read the mood like me, it's really hard. They haven't done it yet. Then they had a terrible week last week. We don't know how close they came, but they know that to do that would be to probably cost a few more Tory MPs their seats at best.
And also I think the other thing about it is we don't know, and ask any MP and they'll say we're not sure. They also agree it could happen by accident rather than design if enough people are unhappy after the May elections. But then there's a question of if they do that and try to torpedo a Prime Minister, are they in general election territory anyway? I mean, there's so many unknowables, isn't there, at the moment?
It's a flowchart. Just keep watching us and we'll tell you what's happening.
Well, we'll do our best. We always do our best for you. Well, look, thanks, Sam. A few minutes ago, I spoke to Minister for Public Health, Andrea Leadsom. She also, of course, knows all about Tory leadership campaigns, having stood for leader herself and managed Penny Mordaunt's tilt at the top job in 2022. So she's the very woman who's now been spoken to about as potentially a successor to Sunak. So Andrea Leadsom had a lot to say about all of that. Thank you for joining us on Politics Hub tonight. Now, I want to talk to you about the new smoking ban that the government's going to introduce. But if you'll let me, before we get there, let's just talk about the end of term for a minute, because it's been a difficult couple of weeks for the Prime Minister. There's been lots of talk about replacing leadership. He went to address backbenchers tonight. Is it now a nest of singing birds? What's the mood in the party?
I think what's really important is we have seen a fantastic drop in inflation today. That's what's really important. That's obviously cheered everyone up. It's what we've been working towards, is seeing the cost of living crisis end, seeing people able to take more home in their pay packets or in their salaries every day. So that's the critical point. And in terms of the party, I think, you know, people are tired. They'll be looking for that Easter recess when they can get back to their constituencies and focus on the issues of local people. But yeah, it's been a tough couple of weeks, but that happens in politics, and I think we're over the worst of it now.
I mean, Andrea, you've been at this since 2010, I think you became an MP, and you've seen a few leadership contests and participated in one and backed another two. Backed another contender.
Yeah.
Has the mood been more febrile than you've experienced in the past? Because it felt really edgy last week.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was driven by media chat and gossip, and actually, you know, the people who were being accused of doing things was simply not true. I mean, I can absolutely say that for, you know, for Penny Mordaunt, who was in the spotlight, she was just getting on with her job and has been all the way through, is totally loyal to the government. I'm completely loyal to Rishi and to what he's trying to achieve. And as I say, the fact that we've seen such a big drop in inflation today, and that the forecast is now that we'll see it drop even further, that's good news for the people of this country. And you know, it's a real reprieve. It's great news. It shows that our plan for the economy is working, and that's what's important.
And Andrea, for viewers that might not sort of know about the reference to Penny, I'll just explain it. You obviously ran her leadership campaign when she went up against Liz Truss, and then again she briefly stood against Sunak before he became Prime Minister and actually nearly took it to the members didn't quite get the numbers. So you are very close to Penny Mordaunt, and there had been all this reporting over the weekend that parliamentary allies of Penny Mordaunt, people would obviously put you in that camp, had been having conversations with people on the right of the party to insert Penny in as the next leader and get rid of Rishi Sunak. And what you're saying is that was just made up, it wasn't true.
Completely made up, not true. We're getting on with the job. We're all trying to get on with the job. And I'll just say it again, the great news for today is this big drop in inflation. That is going to really help people, and that's what we're hearing government to do, is to fulfil our economic programme and our longer-term programme to get, you know, in my brief, to get much better access to GPs for people, to get better access to NHS dentists. And then today, of course, we've got this, the introduction of the smoking bill, which is actually the biggest intervention in a generation in the public health space, and that's what I'm focused on.
And I'm going to absolutely come to that. One more thing on this. In terms of Penny, to the plotters, what's your message? And in terms of Penny, was this done to do her damage because it made her look disloyal?
Well, I don't think it did. I think it was quite clear that she's not disloyal. She's an incredibly loyal and hard-working person. And so I have nothing to say about it. I don't know where it came from, but I and Penny and others are just getting on with our job, supporting Rishi as the Prime Minister to deliver for the people of this country.
And your message to the plotters?
I don't have a message to them. Don't know if there are plotters. I saw the story. I'm nothing to do with it. I don't have a message to them.
Well, the Prime Minister's message is we need to come together. And I
Absolutely, yeah, no, there's no question about it. We need to focus on delivering the Prime Minister's agenda, which is to get the economy growing again, get inflation down, stop the small boats, get NHS waiting lists down. These are the things that really matter to people. These are the things that we're focused on.
And on that, you've talked about inflation. It was good news. Inflation falling faster than expected.
Yeah.
It's now raising the prospect of interest rates cuts later in the summer. This is all part of what Rishi Sunak and the Chancellor were hoping would happen, so you could at least try and argue to the public the economy is turning a corner. So that's a big tick for the Prime Minister. He'll be pleased with that. What about flights to Rwanda? Is the bill going to get through Parliament before you break up for Easter?
Well, it's back in the Lords. This week, the Commons overturned all of the proposed amendments that had come to us from the Lords. It's now back in the Lords and they're debating it this evening again. I and colleagues on my side of the House are absolutely determined we get this bill through. What is so important for the people of this country is that we stop those small boats, that we stop illegal migration. And the fact is, for those illegal migrants, it's also essential for them. They are being human trafficked at great risk of loss of life in crossing the Channel in unseaworthy boats. It is simply unsustainable, and forecasts show that it could end up costing in the tens of billions of pounds if we don't put a stop to this.
What's your message to the Lords tonight, then?
Well, I would say to them, unless they have a fantastic alternative that will work, they need to back this bill. Simply allowing the status quo to continue, as Labour would have, we cannot do that. As Conservatives, we're determined to act in the best interests of the nation.
And given that there were big rebellions on the benches about this, the Prime Minister has not had an easy time with some of his backbenchers who feel that the bill is not strong enough. How important is it that that bill gets through the Commons and completes the parliamentary stages before recess?
So that's really important, but the key to this is we've got to get those flights off the ground, and the reason for that is because getting flights off the ground, that's still the expected timetable in the spring, and once we do that, we will see a massive deterrent effect. And let's not be in any doubt, you know, the rest of the world is watching to see what happens with this bill, and if it's successful, if we actually do see flights taking off, well, when we see flights taking off, we will see a big deterrent effect. We've already seen just the existence of the bill has acted to deter those small boats coming to the UK. We've seen them down by a third, and what that is as a result of this legislation coming forward.
So, Andrea, just to be clear, from your perspective, even if the bill doesn't complete the parliamentary stages and it gets a bit ping-ponged around, because obviously Parliament's breaking up next Tuesday, that won't affect the timetable. You still expect flights to get off the ground by the spring?
Well, in terms of the exact date, the spring is what the government is expecting to see, is that flights take off during that period. The point I'm making is that as soon as we see even a single flight or two flights take off, that will have the effect of making people think twice about taking that dangerous crossing and spending a fortune with human traffickers who are criminals.
And Andrea, for me, spring is March, April and May. Is that the same for you?
It is the same for me.
OK.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if the Prime Minister's version of spring also includes June. But anyway, that's a question for him, not you. And let's go to the tobacco and vapes bill, because the plan is to ban anyone born after 2009 from buying cigarettes.
From legally buying cigarettes, that's right. So there's three parts to it. One is to stop the start, which basically means that if you're turning 15 this year, you will never legally be able to buy cigarettes. Now, that's based on the fact that about 83% of people who start smoking start before they are 20 years old. But big tobacco companies in the United States, when they lifted the legal age to 21, simply changed their business model to appeal to 21-year-olds. So what we want to have is a staggered approach whereby we lift the year every year, so that if you are turning 15 this year, you will never be legally able to buy cigarettes, and therefore you will never be in a position to actually take up smoking.
And for parents, especially of teenagers, and I've got one in my house, what about vapes? Because actually I know that there's restrictions going to be introduced on flavours and packaging and changing to displays, but given that vaping is actually perhaps a bigger problem for teenagers, why are you not banning vapes? A lot of parents will be looking at this saying, if you want to stop young people smoking, ban vapes. Yeah,
so we are actually bringing forward legislation as we speak to ban disposable vapes, which is, about 69% of young people under 18s use disposable vapes for preference. They're pocket money priced. We see vapes next to the sweet counter in newsagents. They are being targeted at children much younger than 18. And we know that around 1 in 5 children have tried vapes now before they're even legally old enough to do so. So what the bill is also doing is bringing forward the regulatory powers to be able to restrict packaging, to be able to restrict flavours, to put those vapes behind the counter, and to really focus on using them as a quit smoking aid as opposed to something that can be marketed to children.
As a mum, when we're talking about banning smoking for 15-year-olds and younger, do you, as a mum, think actually maybe we should ban vapes for 15-year-olds and younger as well? Can you see the argument?
They are banned for they're banned. You cannot buy vapes until you're 18. The problem we have, the fundamental problem, is they're being marketed at children. Yes, but we're also hugely increasing enforcement. So we're increasing the money that's available to enforcement, to trading standards, to border force.
That maybe you should ban vapes as well.
So they will be. They are banned to 18, and what we're doing is enforcing much more strongly, and that's really
fine. I've run out of time, but I have to ask you this because I'm really interested in what you'll say. There's a big this is a free vote, which means that MPs get to decide how to vote, but there is a big opposition from many on your benches that see this as a, quote, nanny state bill. That includes former Prime Minister Liz Truss. She has called this a profoundly unconservative policy because it's kind of telling people how to live their lives. What do you say to those people?
Well, it's just not true, because the point about being addicted to nicotine is you are addicted to nicotine. Ask people who smoke. 2/3 of them wish they'd never taken it up. They wish they could stop, but they can't because they are addicted. So there is no free choice once you are addicted to something. So it simply isn't a matter of free choice nanny state. Not only is it desperately bad and harmful for you, leading to 2/3 of smokers dying early and certainly dying of smoking conditions, but also it costs our society through loss of productivity, through social care, through ill health, through our NHS, £17 billion a year. So this is not a matter of
so
choice.
Your message to Liz Truss is get with the programme.
Absolutely, it is, yes,
Okay.
on this occasion.
OK, Andrea Leadsom, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Andrea Leadsom there. Well, let's bring in our duo for tonight. Conservative MP and former Vice Party Chair of the party, Rehman Chishti, and Director of Labour Together, Josh Simons. So, we're going to get on to smoking, but before we do, Rehman, you were at the 22 tonight. How was it?
Well, look, you know, obviously I can't comment on what went on in the 1922, but I can say this. Look, come on, it's the Prime Minister had an outstanding, warm welcome from the parliamentary party, and everyone was absolutely united to doing everything we can to get a Conservative government elected again when that election comes. And what I would say is this. You know, I supported Rishi Sunak in the July 2022 and then the second round of leadership, because when I looked at the different candidates that were there, and I looked at the biggest issue facing our country was the economy. Who did I think had the best skills possible to deliver on the economy, jobs, prosperity? And if we now look at inflation, it's gone down from 11 to 3%, and that would have a impact on interest rates, people's mortgages on Thursday when that statement comes out. So therefore, if we look at what the Prime Minister has delivered, not saying, judge me by this is what may happen. He's actually taken the economy forward and delivered on that, and that's the number one priority.
The problem is, I guess, Josh, for Rishi Sunak is Rowan's talking about how he's delivering, but the polls just aren't budging, and a lot of your colleagues with majorities of 10 to 20,000 are now looking at thinking, I'm going to lose my seats. I mean, Josh, do you think that it's recoverable in any way? I mean, if you're Labour now, looking at the Conservatives, you can see that there is a route map for Rishi Sunak to at least say the economy's turning the corner come the autumn. Is it a risk for Labour?
Well, I don't think fighting the next election on mortgages is likely to do all that much good for Rishi Sunak. But yes, I think there's a route back. There's always a route back. You know, one thing we know is that polls can move very, very fast. But you're right, you know, Rishi Sunak's own party don't think he's the best person to lead their party. And, you know, we at Labour Together have polled this. We polled Conservative councillors up and down the country, and almost 2/3 thought that they should remove and replace Rishi Sunak before the local elections, which is quite an extraordinary thing if you think about it. These are Conservative councillors who are about to go up for local elections, and they think that Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of this country, is essentially a drag on their vote and holding them back. And that makes it very difficult for the Prime Minister to actually govern.
Right, when you hear those stats, I mean, what does that make you think about the May elections and the kind of moment of danger? Because it is a moment of danger. Please don't try and spin it as...
No, but let me put it this way. I would say there's only one poll that matters. And that poll is whenever that election comes, it's at 10 o'clock at night when the results come in. Have we, as each and every Conservative candidate, done absolutely everything we possibly can to go out there and to demonstrate to the public we're delivering on jobs, economy, prosperity, security? If we're looking at that across the board, then the answer to that is we're making significant progress. We have more to do. But what I would say to Josh is this.
A moment of... Can I just...
Sure.
A lot of your... I've spoken to lots of your colleagues, lots of them, and they're divided about what they feel about the Prime Minister. Lots of them think it's unlikely he'll face a confidence vote. Some of them don't know. They all agree that May is a moment of danger.
Well, look, Beth, what I would say is, look, the fact is we've been in government for 14 years. And through that period of time, we've had to deal with some of the most unprecedented challenges that a country has ever seen. COVID-19. I don't think anyone could ever predict what happened with COVID-19. The government had to then deliver. This Prime Minister was the Chancellor on the furlough scheme to make sure people got the support. We then have Ukraine. And then as a former sanctions minister, we then had to ensure that we cut off reliance on Russia, oil and gas. And therefore, we then have to be self-sustainable. So in that regard, we're now seeing inflation from 11 to 3%. This Prime Minister has delivered. And what I would say to Josh says the polling that they've carried out, you know, as a Labour think tank, of course, one asks the question, what data, what analysis is there? The fact is, as Conservative members of Parliament, are we united to do everything we can to win? And this Prime Minister, my prediction is he'll be there, taking us forward and leading us into the next election.
You're being very valiant in your defence of him. The question was, is it a moment of danger? Well, you keep giving me different answers. Just give me an answer. It is, isn't it?
Well, look, I would say it's when you see results come in and they don't go your way, people ask themselves the question, do we need to look at doing things in a certain kind of way? But the fact is, yeah, in terms of policy, delivery, how do we inspire our vote bank to go out and vote? Absolutely. But what I'm saying to you, a straight answer, Sam was saying, he couldn't possibly say one way or the other. But I would say it will be this Prime Minister leading us into the next election, whenever that may be. And we're there to... this Prime Minister will be leading us into the next election.
That's fair enough. That's a clear answer. On the confidence vote, less clear.
No, what I'm saying to you...
But the point is, you think if he had one, he would win it?
Well, I would say, firstly, I don't see... If you ask me as a Member of Parliament, have I seen conversations across the board? I've been there for 14 years, and I was in that race myself for a very short period of time. What I would say, across the parliamentary party, there is a cross-spectrum of opinion. That's the great thing about the Conservative Party. But we're united on winning, and this Prime Minister will take us forward.
I'm being told to stop asking you questions. It's unbelievable, really, isn't it? Well, look, thanks, guys. We will be back for more. Now, the latest political news is sure to feature in tomorrow's papers. We'll have our extended press preview and news review from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail's Whitehall editor, Claire Ellicott. Now, you're watching the Politics Hub. We've got so much coming up. Another day, another cheesy stunt from the Lib Dems. But lurking behind the cheese, how big a threat is Ed Davey to the Tory blue wall? Plus, Ireland's Prime Minister Leo Varadkar steps down in an emotional statement. He said he was put in for personal and political reasons. And after the break, inflation is down more than expected, largely thanks to falls in the cost of food. But will it shift the dial for the Conservatives? Rishi Sunak really hopes so.
When I was 21 weeks pregnant, I found out that I was going into preterm labour. They did everything they could to try and stop that, but I still ended up having the twins at 25 weeks. Obviously, it's a very, very scary time when you have babies that premature. So I had Luna and Luca on the 31st of Jan in 2022, and obviously we're rushed to neonatal, and you just kind of try and prepare yourself for a very long stay in hospital.
You were in hospital a long time, weren't you?
Yes, 89 days in total Luna was in hospital for. And at the beginning, it was Luna that was very sick. She was the very sick baby. And we weren't really concerned about Luca because he was doing really well. But then very suddenly, when he was just 3 days old, he died of a condition called neck. So then we had to kind of deal with the grief and the loss of losing a baby, which obviously is, you can't really put into words. No. And then still have to deal with another baby who's very sick and poorly in the neonatal. She moved to special care when she was about 7 weeks old, and that's when we kind of knew that she was kind of on the straight and narrow. The Tommy's New Research Centre basically set up because at the moment 53,000 babies are estimated to be born preterm in the UK, which is just, such a high number, and those children, lots of them can die or they can have lots of complications, and the research centre aims to really cut that number and have lots of researchers kind of working together to try and come up with ways to kind of stop preterm labour and also offer care which for everybody is consistent across all different hospitals.
Welcome back. Well, among Rishi Sunak's 5 key priorities, which he set out last year, was stopping the small boats. More on that in just a moment. But one of the others was to get inflation down. And he had some good news on that earlier. As it was revealed, inflation had fallen by more than expected to its lowest level for 2 years in February. Official figures show the rate prices are rising fell to 3.4% in February. That's down from 4% in January, and a significant change from the peak when inflation stood at 11.1% back in October 22. Well, in the run-up to this year's general election, Sky News has been telling stories from the constituencies that will be deciding who gets the keys to number 10. And the constituency of Grimsby and Cleethorpes is one of our target towns. Sky's data and economics editor, Ed Conway, has been there and sent us this report.
2, 5, 2, 10, 2, 10, 2, 10, £2.
If you want to know more about how prices are set, you couldn't do better than come to Grimsby Fish Market.
140, no one.
Economists talk about price discovery. Well, that's what's happening here for cod, for haddock, for halibut. This is the start of a chain which ends up via buyers like Amy with the fish on your plate.
Prices have gone up because everything else has gone up. So we're also affected by fuel. Electricity bills are a big one because it's chilled or frozen, so we have to keep the lights on and the fish chilled. Paper even has gone up, so the labelling of products, even that goes up, so that's the knock-on effect to the consumer.
Put it all together and it helps explain why prices here and across the country are much higher now than a few years ago. Now, what's been happening with fish prices recently is not dissimilar to what's been happening to overall food prices. A bit of a roller coaster, up very sharply thanks to fuel, labour costs, all of the rest of it, and now actually starting to come down. And it's part of the explanation for why inflation is coming down right now. But this is only one small part of the overall shopping basket of prices across the UK. The overall inflation rate dropped to 3.4% in February, lower than expected, and it's expected to fall further in the coming months. Across the dock from the fish market, the renewables industry, offshore wind mostly, is one of this town's success stories in recent years, offering up an alternative future to the fishing industry.
These jobs are good quality jobs. They pay well, they're very well skilled.
But they too have been buffeted by inflation and high interest rates.
What we have seen all around us is uncertainty, so we're very reliant on a supply chain. That supply chain has been fractious, really difficult to maintain. We've seen suppliers go under, we've seen prices, in some elements, we've seen prices go up by 30, 40%.
Now, inflation is just a measure of how fast prices are rising each year. Just because inflation's down doesn't mean prices are down. They're not. It doesn't mean people aren't feeling squeezed. They are.
You're going to go play again.
Gemma recently returned to work after taking time out to study and have children. Like many, she recently refixed her mortgage at a much higher rate, an extra hit to her living standards.
We're sort of adjusting to having 2 incomes, which 3 years ago we felt would massively improve our quality of life, but the economy at the moment has sort of taken up that. So we're comfortable, we can afford everything that's going up, but it's not the life that we sort of expected we would have due to inflation.
The Chancellor is hoping that as inflation drops back to normal rates, people start to feel better about the economy. As an election approaches, the message from Grimsby and Cleethorpes, a key constituency Labour are targeting, is that the feel-good factor isn't back yet. Ed Conway, Sky News in Grimsby.
Ed Conway there. Well, on to Rishi Sunak's other target, which is to stop the small boats, because the Lords have been voting on the government's flagship Rwanda bill tonight. This comes after the Commons rejected the Lords' amendments earlier this week and batted it back to the red benches. So where are we on the prospect of the Prime Minister's longed-for deportation flights to Rwanda? Sky's political correspondent Serena Barker-Singh is in central lobby for us. Nice to see you, Serena. Now, there's been a lot of talk about rebellions and this bill getting slowed down in the Lords. How is it going for the government this afternoon? And are we any clearer about whether those flights really can get away in the spring?
Well, it's not going hugely well for the government at the moment. Now, there was a possibility this bill could be done and dusted today if the House of Lords voted down any fresh amendments that peers had put in. That's not what's happened. In fact, most of the amendments so far have been voted for. So these are the changes that the peers want to see. And all 7 now, I believe, have been, the government have a defeat on that. So I think that's not a great indication, although how much that was expected and how much they were priced in. Some Tory MPs have been texting today saying they're not hugely surprised. I think the majority is interesting. So the first amendment that Labour put in had a majority of 43, which is quite sizable for the Lords, but compared to what the last chamber had when it was about 100 votes, it's gone down. I think that tells you 2 things. Now, the Lords had a discussion about how annoyed that they were that it come back to the Lords completely unamended. So crossbench peers' votes have gone up, but Tory peers are much more conservative. It shows that they're being whipped on this potentially. Where the government lost was perhaps that Tory peers, not enough of them had shown up today. So now what happens is this ping-pong between the 2 chambers, between the Lords and the House of Commons, and that can last up to about 5 rounds. We think that it will only be around 3. That's what the whips are expecting. The problem with this is that the government says they want the bill as it's originally passed, so peers may eventually have to back down.
Thank you, Serena. A bit of parliamentary ping-pong there. I guess the big question really is, will the flights get off the ground? And let's bring in Rehman and Josh. Josh, I'm going to come to you because Starmer seems to have changed the approach on this. Now it's not going to work, the flights won't get off the ground. Now it's all about, oh, it's just a gimmick. Is that an admission from Labour that the flights will probably get away? And even if it is 1 or 2, that is still a win for the Prime Minister. You can still say, I'm delivering on my plan. Is it a problem for Labour?
Well, I think that what Keir Starmer has always said is what's not going to work is that the number of people that this scheme will send to Rwanda is so infinitesimally small compared to the number of people coming over on small boats, which is about 30,000. The Court of Appeal was very clear that even if the scheme works, it's in the hundreds. What Keir has argued all the way through is that it will not make a meaningful difference to the small boats problem. So I actually think the flights off the ground, we've slightly overdone the significance of that moment. So flights get off the ground, then what voters will be looking to is, has Rishi Sunak delivered his promise to stop the small boats? And we don't think that Rwanda will do that.
Politics is always also about telling stories and selling an idea. How critical is it for the Prime Minister to get a flight off the ground? I mean, he's made it, I don't know why he made it his hill to die on, but he has made it absolutely totemic to his premiership, hasn't he?
Well, look, Beth, I think it's the fact that illegal migration is a real issue that any country around the world has to deal with swiftly and quickly in terms of our national interest. I sat on the Home Affairs Select Committee for 3 years, and we looked at all different initiatives that could be taken to address illegal migration coming in. We put the Navy in there, but that didn't work. We had a joint coordination centre with France. That didn't quite work. We've got the return scheme with Albania. That has worked, you know, with 93% of individuals being sent back to Albania. This initiative with regards to Rwanda is a plank as part of a wider strategy to deter individuals.
Walking the plank if he doesn't get them off the ground.
The fact is, individuals should be deterred if they come to the United Kingdom illegally, then they'll be sent to a third country to have their application.
He's got to deliver it, hasn't he?
Well, we are committed to doing everything we can to ensure that we deliver on illegal migration.
Yes or a no?
I'm saying to you, we are absolutely committed to do that. The opposition didn't vote for it. We put it through Parliament, through the House of Commons, and we will make sure we do everything we can to address illegal migration.
Well, after the Prime Minister lost the battle with the Supreme Court and introduced this emergency legislation, he had a read my lips moment and told the electorate, I will get those flights off to Rwanda, and he will perhaps be judged on that, but we will see. Thank you, gentlemen. Well, look, you're watching the Politics Hub coming up. Later in the programme, daft campaign stunts aside, how big a threat are the Liberal Democrats to the Tory blue wall? And next up, Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar steps down, bidding an emotional farewell and saying he doesn't feel he's the best person to do the job anymore. We'll have more on that story. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Well, I was on air here on Sky News earlier for Prime Minister's questions, and it's pretty rare for us to break off from the PM being challenged in Parliament at the dispatch box. But we did that earlier because of a shock announcement coming through from Dublin. Irish PM Leo Varadkar was revealing he was stepping down as party leader of Fine Gael.
I've learned so much about so many things, met so many people who I'd never got to meet, been to places I would never have seen, both home and abroad. And I am deeply grateful for it. And despite the challenges, would wholeheartedly recommend a career in politics to anyone who's considering it. However, politicians are human beings and we have our limitations. We give it everything until we can't anymore, and then we have to move on.
I'm lucky to have Stephen with me. He's had quite the day. That was a bit of a bombshell, wasn't it, Stephen? And we saw the Taoiseach's explanation, but is there more to this than meets the eye?
Oh, look, Beth, I think really, if you ask the journalists here in Dublin, I think we're all actually quite secretly impressed that Leo Varadkar managed to keep this as secret as he did. You know yourself, Beth, things that leak, newsrooms, sieves, and political parties. How rare is it that you get the Prime Minister of a country walking out and simply quitting without any kind of a leak or a hint of what was to come? We were all around government buildings this morning focusing on new proposals on assisted dying in Ireland, which is still a very significant story, but there wasn't any kind of a hint, there wasn't any kind of gossip in the corridors of power that we were going to see this major announcement. Then mid-morning we got word of this mystery midday announcement from the Taoiseach, and we were told it was going to be significant. And of course, it really was. He didn't really elaborate too much within his at times emotional address to us at government buildings. He basically broke it into two aspects. He said it was for personal and political reasons, and certainly the political reasons are a lot more clear-cut to understand. He said himself there were a lot of loyal friends and colleagues facing into elections, the local and European elections just about 7 weeks away at the moment, and he had come to the conclusion, and I can tell you that many backbenchers had already arrived at that conclusion in recent times, that they would stand a better chance facing the voters with a fresh leadership and a new Taoiseach, a new party leader for Fine Gael. He has been leaking backbenchers. The number is now up to 10 of his elected TDs, that's members of the Irish Parliament, who have announced that they're going to stand aside and not run in the next election. That may not sound huge by, say, UK standards, but don't forget, in Ireland, it's obviously a much smaller political system. When he formed a coalition government after the last election in 2020, he did so with 33 TDs. So that's 30% of the TDs that won seats at the last election from his party announcing their intention to step aside, and that will always raise questions about the faith and the confidence that the parliamentary party has in its leadership. Throw on top an absolutely humiliating defeat in 2 referendums earlier this month, referendums that no one thought any Irish government could ever lose, to essentially get rid of outdated and frankly sexist language from the Irish constitution. Leo Varadkar, through utter lacklustre campaigning, managed to do the impossible and turn it into a resounding defeat, and that really set people thinking about whether it was time for a change within Fine Gael.
Absolutely fascinating. Stephen, you've had a busy day, but still on top form. Thank you so much for joining us on the Politics Hub. Well, let's speak now to former Irish ambassador to the US, Daniel Mulhall. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. It's lovely to see you. I haven't seen you for a while. Is it
we're old
fair
friends,
to
Ben.
say...
I remember you well from my time in London.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that this was a bit of a shock?
Yes, it was a huge shock. I had no notion that this would happen. I remember him telling me years ago that he was not going to be a lifer in politics. I remember I was with him one day when some senior politician retired after 40 years in politics. He said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be out of politics. I'm going to have another, career after I finish in politics. And of course, you have to remember, he started in politics at 27. He's been 13 years a minister and Taoiseach. So he's had a pretty long innings by most people's standards. And I think I actually agree. I believe what he said is probably right, that he didn't have the heart for another campaign, another bruising election with an uncertain result, and decided to step aside and give someone else a chance to lead the party into the next election.
Do you think he left before he felt he might be pushed?
I don't think there was any suggestion that he would be pushed before the next election, but I dare say, had the election gone badly for him, or even perhaps if the European elections were to go badly, or the elections, the local elections that are due in June, that could have certainly led to a heave against him. But I don't think he was under any immediate pressure to go. I think he genuinely decided that it was time for him to go after really an extraordinary career of becoming Taoiseach Prime Minister in his late 30s, and I think doing a decent job as Taoiseach during a very difficult time, COVID, Brexit, the effects of Brexit, and then more recently the impact of the war in Ukraine on the economy of Europe as a whole. And this is not an easy time to be an incumbent in any country in Europe, and I think that the same applies in Ireland, where incumbency is certainly not a benefit. It's rather a serious burden that a party carries into an election. And remember, like the Conservatives in Britain, the Fine Gael party has been in government since 2011. So it's a long, long time in government, and these things tend to have a time. And I suppose he felt that if he stepped aside, his successor might have a honeymoon period and might get a bit of a boost in the polls.
And Daniel, I mean, he is still so young. I think he's still only, is he 45?
44 or 5, yeah. So
yeah,
he's
still such a young man, but he just said, you know, I haven't got enough in the tank kind of vibe. Final thought, how do you think he will be remembered? Do you think that in time he will be looked back as a very successful Taoiseach? What's the legacy?
Well, I think the legacy will be quite positive. Obviously, at the moment, there's a lot of criticism of him and so forth. Not, by the way, because of his race or his sexual orientation, but rather, I suppose, he's been around a long time and people have started to get to have negative views about him, which obviously affects him. You can see the way he was so emotional in his final statement. So I think his legacy will be, when people look back on him in the cold light of day, they will see that he managed COVID pretty well. We had a relatively low death rate from COVID. The economy bounced back pretty well after the shock of the financial and economic crisis of 15 years ago, and even the impact of the war in Ukraine and the surge in inflation and the influx of 100,000 Ukrainians into Ireland. These things, of course, are not easy to manage, but I think they have been managed reasonably well. I was always very impressed with him when he was traveling abroad, when I was in America and elsewhere. He always came across very well. He presents himself very well to audiences. But obviously, in Ireland, he was running into difficulties. His rating wasn't too bad, 40%. Positive rating from the Irish public, which is not bad at all. But his party was down at 19-20% in the polls. And he probably felt that he was going to face a very difficult election campaign and probably maybe not be able to come back as Taoiseach after the election, and therefore decided to call it a day now and to give a new leader a chance to take the party into the next general election.
Daniel Mulhall, thank you so much for joining us. It's rare when a politician takes the decision to quit rather than push. There's not many of them that do that. Thank you so much for joining us. I wish we had time to talk longer. You're watching The Politics Hub coming up. The message from Ed Davey today: the Lib Dems are coming for you, Rishi Sunak. And still come...
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
welcome back to Politics Hub. Aren't the Lib Dems scary? Now, don't laugh. If the polls are anything to go by, Rishi Sunak has cause to be alarmed. Yes, Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey today vowed to bring the blue wall tumbling down, throwing down the challenge to the Conservatives in southern England. How big are they as a threat? It remains to be seen. But I'll tell you what, it takes serious balls to attempt to pull off some of their election stunts. So we thought we'd bring you some of the best, or should that be the worst, Lib Dem stunts.
3, 2, 1!
Let me show you.
Are you terrified?
Of what?
Of them.
What's their policies?
Oh, it was fun though, wasn't it? Honestly, killjoy. But don't you think, I do think that the one where he goes through the wall on the tractor, the bales of hay, that was a rip-off, wasn't it? If Boris Johnson, do you remember him going through the brick wall, the polystyrene wall of Get Brexit Done?
Well, I think what they've clearly done is targeted certain seats they want to focus on. And I think we've seen with the Lib Dems over many, many years that they come up with various different stunts and gimmicks which distract away from looking at delivering on the key policy areas. But look, we've seen it with Joe Swinson. We saw it with Vince Cable. We're seeing it with Ed Davey. They've come out with some of these distractions, but they haven't really come out with how they're going to deliver.
Josh, I think that the lack of fondness there from Rehman about Lib Dem stunts, I can't believe you didn't love them, it's because he's a bit worried. Is he a bit worried about the old blue wall there?
He should be worried. I mean, the thing that we need to remember about 1997 is that when the public decides that a Conservative government has run out of time, seats right across the country that are actually very different and diverse tend to vote against the Conservatives, so you should be worried. OK,
well, I'm worried that I might miss wrapping this programme, so I'm going to have to stop it there. Thank you so much for joining us. That's it from us tonight. Up next, it's the UK Tonight with Sarah Jane Mead, speaking about crisis expert management.